In the late 19th and early 20th century, large numbers of workers were not unionized, did not have representation, could not bargain with their employers. And so if they were in a workspace that was dangerous and they went to their boss and they said, you know, I'm worried about this staircase here because every time I go up and down the staircase, the stair waggles and I'm afraid I'm going to fall down and break my head. And the employer could just say, bye, you're fired. And if something happened, say that worker decided to keep the job, to go up and down the staircase, and one day the stair broke and the worker fell and broke an arm, couldn't work. What do they get? Nothing.
The American economy was evolving. The Industrial Revolution had left the country in a state of improvement and economic growth. The nation was shifting from rural and agricultural to urban and industrial. Newly opened factories needed workers, and lots of them. Millions of immigrants flooded to the country to fulfill these jobs and to escape the poverty, war, and intolerance in Europe. With no legal protection or safety regulations, workers often suffered harsh conditions in the workplace. Men, women, and children labored for long hours in the dark, unventilated factories among dangerous machines. For this grueling work, they received just pennies a day. Whenever strikes were organized to protest the conditions, they were often broken up by policemen hired by the factory owners. American author Upton Sinclair realized the plight of these stockyard workers and wished to expose the horrors and brutality of their everyday lives. His shocking account of the conditions inside Chicago's meat plants is documented in his famous novel, The Jungle, published in February 1906. The book follows the fictional character Jurgis Rudkus, a Lithuanian immigrant that comes to the United States for employment. He soon realizes the horrors that can occur inside American factories. There would be meat that had tumbled out onto the floor, in the dirt and sawdust where the workers had trampled and spit uncounted billions of consumption germs. There would be meat stored in great piles in rooms, and the water from leaky roofs would drip over it, and thousands of rats would race about on it. It was too dark in these storage places to see well, but a man could run his hand over the piles of meat and sweep off handfuls of dried dung of rats. These rats were nuisances, and the packers would put poisoned bread out for them. They would die, and then rats, bread, and meat would go into the hoppers together. This is no fairy story and no joke. The meat would be shoveled into carts, and the man who did the shoveling would not trouble to lift out a rat even when he saw one. There were things that went into the sausage in comparison with which a poisoned rat was a tidbit. There was no place for the men to wash their hands before they ate their dinner, and so they made a practice of washing them in the water that was to be ladled into the sausage. There were the butt ends of smoked meat and the scraps of corned beef, and all the odds and ends of the waste plants that would be dumped into old barrels in the cellar and left there. Under the system of rigid economy which the packers enforced, there were some jobs that only paid to do once in a long time, and among these was the cleaning out of the waste barrels. Every spring they did it, and in the barrels would be dirt and rust and old nails and stale water, and cartload after cartload of it would be taken up and dumped into the hoppers with fresh meat, and sent out to the public's breakfast. Some of it they would make into smoked sausage, but as the smoking took time and was therefore expensive, they would call upon their chemistry department and preserve it with borax and color it with gelatin to make it brown. All of their sausage came out of the same bowl, but when they came to wrap it up, they would stamp some of it special, and for this they would charge 2 cents more a pound. These are just some of the vivid accounts provided by Sinclair. Over time, the feedlots, slaughterhouses, and processing plants would come to be known as Packingtown. The public's reaction to the novel was a mix of anger and utter disgust. They were outraged that such filth was being fed to them by their own country. The government began to receive 100 letters a day demanding a federal cleanup of the meat industry. When word about the meat scandal spread overseas, countries around the world began to react. A series of cartoons named The Lodger and Chicago Tinned Meat emerged from a British printer and were then circulated in South Africa. The cartoons depict a traveler attempting to eat various products from Chicago's factories, and his appalled reaction when he witnessed his creature sprouting from the can amid rotten, putrid, and pickled substances. These cartoons gained popularity, worsening the United States' reputation. The meat trade overseas began to be threatened as other countries no longer wished to do business under such conditions. Sinclair began to send letters to President Roosevelt explaining his purpose in investigating the industry and then asking for change. Unable to ignore the pleas of the American public, soon there were new, federally approved inspectors on their way to every plant in Packingtown. When Sinclair's horrific claims were found to be true, Roosevelt made immediate changes to congressional laws. In June 1906, the Meat Inspection Act and the Pure Food and Drug Act were both passed. These laws prohibited the usage of unadulterated or misbranded meat and ensured that they would be handled and processed in sanitary conditions. The U.S. Department of Agriculture was now required to inspect all livestock entering the plants before and after it was slaughtered. Even after these improvements were made in food safety, Sinclair was not entirely satisfied. His original intention for writing The Jungle was to bring attention to the injustice and mistreatment towards the workers in the industry. He found that much of the reforms were solely for regulations in food safety and sanitation, and not necessarily for the lives of the employees. Although this compromise was a huge advancement for the progressive movement, Sinclair was disappointed in the public's feeble response to the lack of protection given to workers in the dangerous factories. His efforts did not go ignored. However, it often took a great tragedy to evoke change. Later events such as the Triangle Shirtwaist factory fire in 1911 were the catalyst for permanent safety regulations. In 1913, the Department of Labor was established, finally ensuring a safe working environment to all wage earners and providing benefits for healthcare and retirement. Workmen's compensation, established in 1915, was another powerful reaction to greater awareness of labor rights, and at last gave financial security to employees across the nation. The advancements in safety and the well-being of laborers in today's workplaces would not have been accomplished without the progressive reform movement and the influence of Upton Sinclair. The reactions to conflicts in industry and the resulting compromises from government authority all enabled the American labor force to become strong, organized, regulated, and one that has earned a respected status among the world's top producers. This success is all thanks to the dedicated American labor force and to the country that works so hard to protect them.